Welcome online students. We're in a classroom of hybrid students that also have the online experience, and tonight we're just going to do a brief discussion on fitness. And what I like about this book and what they've done differently, which is actually one of the benefits of this book, is they've broken it down for fitness for purpose. The whole purpose of fitness is what? If you were just thinking about generalized fitness, what's the purpose?
Increase your health.
Increase your health. I know a lot of times we think of goals. We want to fit into a pair of jeans. We want to be fit by a certain time period or date. And we don't think of it necessarily from a perspective of health. The one thing that we do, I think that makes the biggest difference for our lifetime is not just our nutrition, but what we do with our body. Your heart is what's going to kill you. I mentioned this last week, and I don't mean to be grim. 66% of us will die from heart disease or stroke, which is just another form of a heart disease. So with those kinds of statistics, and we look at that and think 2/3 of us, that's what we're going to die from, what can we do? The number one thing we can do is make our heart stronger. And the only way to make our heart stronger is to make it pump more efficiently. Now, I kind of make jokes about this, but when I think about a great athlete that has an incredible ability for their heart to pump, the first person that always comes to mind, because I was always a swimming fan, I love the Olympics, which are coming up this summer, and I think about Michael Phelps. And I guarantee when I think about Michael Phelps, we joke about Michael Phelps and drugs and everything else. I know Michael Phelps, it's impossible that he could use a lot of drugs because to have the lung capacity and the heart capacity of an athlete like this, he's about 6'7", and his limbs are incredibly long. So his heart has to pump to all of that body. And in order to do so, his heart's about the size of his fist and a hand over it. His resting heart rate is 28 beats per minute. Now think about that. 28 beats per minute. And I'll give you a play-by-play of what that would look like. Pump, pump, pump. That's how slow his heart pumps. You would think it sounds unhealthy, but it's because his heart is so strong. Your heart is a muscle, that's all it is. It's the most important muscle you have. Nothing is more important than your heart, literally. So when that heart is pumping, once every 2 seconds or a little over 2 seconds that it takes to pump, most of our hearts are pumping about like this. Pump. I mean, think about your heart. So now you feel like such a failure because your poor little heart's pumping along and Michael Phelps is like, pump, pump, and it's throwing blood. The key is when your heart pumps and it throws that blood to your entire body, it has to be oxygenated. If you don't have oxygenated blood to throw to your entire body, then you have to pump more often. And you have to pump more often if you can't push that much blood out. If you have high blood pressure and it's creating pressure in your arteries, then you have to pump harder to get through that pressure. So all of those things relate to that. The lower your resting heart rate is, the better it is for your health. Now, of course, everybody always asks me, can it be too low? Yes, you could drop dead right now because your resting heart rate went to 10. But for the most part, for most people, the lower your resting heart rate is means the healthier your heart is because it's pumping enough oxygenated blood in less beats. Now, if I give you a choice, if I said you could have a resting heart rate, you're an athlete, you have a resting heart rate of 30 beats per minute, or your resting heart rate is average, which is about 80, 85 beats per minute. Whose heart do you think is going to pump longer over a lifetime? The one that pumped less. It's like running a marathon. Literally, slow and controlled wins the race. And when we look at our hearts, they just continue to beat higher and higher. And when we do nothing about it, we're actually taking an active step backwards. We're not taking a step forward as far as health. We're taking a step backwards. I mentioned last week, everything you put into your mouth or don't put into your mouth, and everything that you eat and drink plays a part in your health. All of fitness does too, and by every day you doing nothing, that takes us farther away from health. But the most amazing part about fitness, I think, and it's true no matter what, is once you start doing it, you see rapid gains. Don't you agree? After just a few weeks, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, you start to notice these massive gains in fitness. You can even notice it. Many of you take the stairs over here. I always notice that. Oh man, I noticed it when I was pregnant. The more pregnant I got, the longer those stairs got. I think as that baby was pushing up on my lungs, I felt like I was going to collapse at the top. But the big difference is, when you're more out of shape, you start to have those signs and symptoms. And the first signs and symptoms are you out of breath when you shouldn't be? 2 flights of stairs shouldn't make you exhausted, that you have to stand at the top and wait. And if you do, all that is a sign and symptom. It's nothing to shame you with. That's not personal. It's just saying, you know what, look at this, reflect, and say, this is making me winded. It means my heart's not strong enough. What can I do to make it stronger? So the way I think about health and the way I think about fitness is, how can you incorporate it into your life so that way it can become such a part of you that not only could you not live without it, every day that you don't have some form of kind of activity in your life, you're not extending your life to the fullest. I think that's the biggest key. What are your objectives for this module? The 5 components of health-related fitness, looking at the benefits. It's very funny because I used to ask, this is on your quiz too, I ask you all the benefits of physical activity. I had some students, when I used to do this on paper and pen, turn it in, I can't think of any. I was like, what? You can't think of even one benefit. It could have been anything whatsoever. Like, I like myself better because I exercise. And sometimes they couldn't even think of one. Let's see if this works. This is just a couple of statistics and why I think they're a little bit important, because when you look about 40% lower risk of dying early than those who are active for less than 30 minutes a week. 40% chance less of dying early. Now think about it in your family. Reflect to yourself. Christmas future is your future, and Christmas future is looking at what is your family's kind of lineage and history. Are your parents heart healthy? Were your grandparents heart healthy? Did people die early? Did they live a very long time? Some of you I know from some of the things in your journal had relatives that were over 100. That's looking good for you. I hope you have a good retirement fund, and I also hope that you do some exercise so you can be fit. But some of you have grandparents that all passed away before 60, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I'm 20, 30, 40 years old. 60 is not nearly long enough. We know that. So no one wants to be that 60. And there was actually good news statistics-wise a week ago. They extended the life expectancy for all populations of people by a few more years, which put women, many women, actually put white women into the 80s, and I believe Hispanic women into the 80s. Black women were 2 years behind. And we look at, and there's lots of reasons for that. We could talk about this for decades in health. But some of the reasons are specific diseases, culture, poverty, all kinds of different things. And men were a few years behind in all of those categories. But at the same time, by that increasing, that's making us live longer, and you want to live better. I mentioned and talked about those people that I bought my first house from at 102 and 104 years old, still mowing the lawn. I don't think of it as sad. I think, wow, he probably lived that long because he was still active and mowing the lawn and doing those physical activity types of things. Young adults with low cardiovascular fitness levels are 2 to 3 more times likely to develop diabetes. They used to call it late onset diabetes. Now they call it type 2 because 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds have type 2 diabetes, which is most diabetes, when we look at it, about 92% of type 2 diabetes is tied to obesity, sedentary lifestyle, and poor nutrition. So no one wants this. No one says, you know what, I want to have that. I'd rather not do anything and have this. It's a significant disease. It can create kidney failure, blindness, and so on. Women who perform 1 year of strength training improve their ability for mental focus, resolving conflicts, and so on. More importantly than that statistic is the statistic about your levels of osteoporosis. You've already lost about 20% of your bone density by the time you're in your 20s. I didn't say 50s, I just said 20s. So almost everybody in here has lost a chunk of their bone density. That's a big deal, because look at your Christmas future again. Look at your grandmother, look at your mom, look at the people around you. My grandmother was 6'1", which is very rare for a really old Italian lady. But now when I see my grandmother, she's shorter than I am. I'm 5'11". That's because her vertebrae and her discs and her back and her bones and her cartilage have shrunk, and that's because of osteoporosis. So look at what your family history is kind of giving you as clues to what you need to pay attention to for your health. 2 types of physical fitness. There's some that we think of, which are skills-related fitness. This is where a lot of times when you're young, PE used to focus on that. Don't you agree? We used to play stupid games like dodgeball, where the slow kid gets hit first and gets to sit out. How great is that for the slow kid? You probably would like more physical activity, would like to be included, and instead you have to watch the really fast, strong kids play for as long as they needed to. And so when we think about the way that we used to do physical activity in PE, and the way they do PE now is lifetime-related fitness. I grew up playing sports. I hated fitness. I didn't want to be fit. I didn't want to exercise, but I loved to race. I loved to compete. I loved to win. And those were the reasons that got me not only through fitness, but got me through college. I guarantee I wouldn't have made it through college without sports, because that was my drive. That's what gave me, that's why I went to class, so I could be eligible, so I could compete, so I could try to win and continue the cycle. And I think a lot of us did that. But then when I got done, I thought, okay, what do I do now? Then I started finding things I liked. I had never played racquetball before. I picked up a racket and said to my sister, trying to play racquetball. We played. Next thing you know, we're competing, and then it was fun again. And so it was something that I enjoyed. And many people in here, how many of you have never tried racquetball? A lot of us. It's so fun. It really is. And it's just something out of your ballpark. I've tried things. I went over to my sister's house a couple weekends ago. She made me do with this really weird guy. this Brazilian butt lifting. Has anyone done that? Have you seen or heard this?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I don't think I could walk for 3 days. So I've done the Brazilian butt lifting 4 times. And I had to suffer through the guy with his strange telling you to pick up your boom boom, and whatever else he says. But the point is, it was something different, and it was something that was fun to do that was out of my ballpark. I'd never done anything like that before. And I think a lot of times there's things that we just don't know that we could do that we would enjoy. And those are types of health-related fitness. There's no skill in doing a Brazilian butt lift. That's like learning to play tennis. The health-related ones are the most important. And the big 5 components, the most important components, are cardiorespiratory fitness. This is, above all, far and beyond, the only thing that matters as far as how long you'll live. Your body doesn't care if you're flexible. You won't drop dead from not being flexible. But you will drop dead because your heart stopped working. Because your heart decided to not pump strong enough to be able to send oxygenated blood everywhere. And that's the biggest difference. It's the foundation for everything. It's the best indicator of your overall fitness. And one kind of really easy way to just check to see where your resting heart rate is if you were to stop, and you can do this when you're at home. And tonight I realized that most all of you have had caffeine. I hope no one's had alcohol before class, although it might make the time pass more quickly. I joke, I'm joking. But when we look at the end of the day, it's hard to get a true resting heart rate. When you wake up in the morning, take your resting heart rate, first thing, take your 2 fingers, tip your head back into the side, you'll feel a lump right underneath that, take your resting heart rate for a minute. And when you take your resting heart rate, you hope it's as low as you can go. Now ideally, you'd be below 70. Now the problem is people say, well, 80's average, 70's average. Do you want to die average? I lived to 70, that was good enough, that's average. I met my average. No, that's not what you want. You want to make that heart pump as long as possible, so make it pump less and make it be stronger. The key for cardiorespiratory fitness, which we'll discuss, is making your heart uncomfortable. That's the only way to get it to be stronger. And the only way you can make your heart uncomfortable is the same way you make any other muscle uncomfortable. If I gave you a gallon of milk and said, lift that gallon of milk like this until your arm and your bicep cannot do it anymore. Some of you could lift it 3 times. And some of you could lift it 700 times and you would just keep lifting, and then eventually everybody gets to a point where you can't lift that gallon of milk. That's failure for your arm. You're literally building muscle when you do that. When you build muscle in your heart, the only way to know that you're stressing your heart is the symptoms that your body displays when your heart is stressed. What are those symptoms? Being out of breath, sweating. The key for activity is, would you rather someone shut up that was jogging next to you? They keep talking to you. My sister does this. She's like 29, she runs marathons, I go running with her and I look at her like, I wish you would just shut up. Because she's talking and asking me questions. Sometimes she'll start singing and it makes me hate her. And so I think all of those things. And I am at a point where my heart rate's higher because I don't run marathons like she does. So the key is making sure that you're in an area, in a zone that stresses you, that makes you sweat. I hear so many people say, I do cardiovascular activity, but I don't get any benefits from it. And then I see them come from the gym, and they look really good. If you look really good after your workout, and you don't look like you were dragged through the mud a little, you don't look a little flushed, you haven't sweated, maybe you didn't cry, whatever it is, you need to have worked. You need to literally have worked. And the only way you can tell you've worked is if you're soaked with sweat, if you are out of breath, if you couldn't sing while you were exercising, and you'd rather the person next to you shut up. What are the big components when we look at strength? Muscular strength and muscular endurance are the next ones. And this is the maximum force you can apply in a single repetition. And the single repetition would be, what's the most you could lift, say, in any type of situation? We always think of a one repetition bench press. And that would be kind of an example of a 1 rep max. And that determines your 1 repetition maximum of a certain muscle group. Now the same thing for anything that you were to choose. If I gave you something very heavy and said lift it over your head, you'd all have a maximum. What is important about this is, it's most important because this is one of the things that helps to protect your back, boost your performance, increase your metabolic rate. Those things build muscle. And so when you have stronger muscle, it makes sure that your metabolism is increased, that your strength is increased, which also helps to increase specifically for women. Weight-bearing activity increases our bone density. We need to increase our bone density every day because every day you're not increasing it is a day that your bone density is decreasing. So it's just like anything else. By not doing anything, you're slipping away. And we know that. I mean, if I asked, for example, women in here are losing bone density and aren't as strong in their upper body. If I asked you to lift 5 pounds with your upper body, it might be difficult. Men are decreasing in their flexibility. If I said, all men, bend over, touch your toes, put your ankles around your neck, which I would love to see you all do. But most men realize at that point, wow, I'm not as flexible as I was when I was 10, 11, 13 years old. So we've all started to lose something. And increasing strength through strength training exercises like free weights, resistance bands, even using your body and your own body weight. That's what I like about this. It used to be kind of this common philosophy you had to go to the gym and work out with weights. Don't you agree? And now we're starting to see all this other stuff. You can do every type of lift that you need, every type of weight-bearing activity at home. Your body is its own weight. You're your own 150 pounds of whatever. And when you do squats, you're doing that with resistance. You're doing that with your own body's weight. So it's something to pay attention to, is just looking at what you can do at home. Now, the different types of muscular endurance. This is the capacity for your body to be able to do something repetitiously. So like I mentioned, the milk gallon, this is the muscular endurance. Some of you could do it 50 times, and some of you could do it 200. But whatever your maximum is what your muscular endurance capacity is. And this is measured through how long you can hold a force that's motionless, or how long you can sustain a force in motion. The one that says motionless, you're thinking, what the heck does that mean? Anybody ever done a wall sit? Any athletes in here? Where you squat against a wall and you stay there as long as you can? Some of you can do it. Try it when you get home in the bathroom. Before you get in the shower, you'll be naked. Sit against the wall for 10 seconds, and you might collapse. Some people might take a minute, 2 minutes, but you'll find out kind of what your 1 rep max is. And if your legs aren't strong enough to hold you, even for 10, 20, 30 seconds, it's an indicator that your largest muscle groups aren't as strong as they could be. Take that to heart. Do something to strengthen them. They're important for posture as well as performing activities. And this is what helps to increase your duration of exercises. Do you ever feel like sometimes you're doing something like jogging or swimming or whatever it is, and you're not as out of breath as you could be, but your muscles are tired? Your muscles are sore. That's because your muscular endurance isn't as strong as your cardiorespiratory endurance. The next one, the flexibility. This is really a big one, not just for everybody in here, but if I could say specifically for men. One of the reasons that we have such high levels of lower back injury and lower back, specifically claims for medical claims, it's one of the #1 reasons that we have people out of work in the country, specifically men, is because not having enough lower hamstring and lower back strength and core strength. So if your abs aren't strong and your legs aren't flexible, that you should be able to lay on your back and lift your legs to 90 degrees for gentlemen, at least, regardless of your age. 90 degrees, you're thinking, that doesn't seem like much. It's, I think, a little bit farther than some of us realize. It would be the equivalent of bending over and touching your toes standing, which can be difficult. So by paying attention to that and looking at that, what does that mean? It means you're setting yourself up for low back injury or back injuries throughout your lifetime as well. It relieves muscle tension, back pain. It also increases your ability to be able to do more muscular endurance, more muscular strength, and more cardiovascular endurance. You know, years ago they used to say, I coached fast pitch softball at the universities when we were in Michigan. And for many of you that know, if anybody played baseball or softball in here, the season starts in March. Well, in Michigan in March we still have snow, so we would have to plow the field, so we could go out there. And we'd go out in February and March. We'd get them to plow the field, and then the players would start running. And this was 15 years ago. They'd run after they stretched. So the first thing we'd do with cold muscles is go out, form a circle, and stretch all our muscles. Now we realize that it's more important to warm up those muscles first to create flexibility and then stretch them next. You can't stretch cold muscles. It doesn't work that way. Just the benefits. We all know there's lots of benefits, and I mentioned before, the #1 benefit is if your heart's not strong enough to pump, it won't live as long as it possibly could. And that's something to think about at 15, at 25, and at 50. It's always important, because we think of a lot of times, you know what, I feel physically fit because your body is young. Just because your body is young and it may feel physically fit doesn't mean you're doing what you can for your heart to prevent it from feeling worse when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, and hopefully 105. That would be ideal. Reduces your risk of all kinds of cancers. I already told you last week you're more likely to die of colon cancer than you are of breast cancer. This decreases your risk for all of those. It increases your metabolism. It helps your body flow. It's an automatic detoxifier and gets rid of toxins in your system. It helps with better weight management. And the key for weight management is every pound of fat that your body has to pump to is extra work for your heart. A lot of times we don't think of it that way. Did you think of it that way? That every pound of extra fat that you have means your heart has to work harder to throw blood to that fat. And when we look at the psychological issues that go along with exercise, I know a lot of times it can feel incredibly empowering to be able to exercise, to do something physically fit for yourself. And we all have the excuses and the reasons we don't want to exercise. But if there's something we really want to do, we want to make a part of our life, then we'll find a place to incorporate it. Type 2 diabetes increases our lung efficiency and capacity. The more strengthened our lungs are, the easier it is for our heart to get oxygenated. the easier it is for our heart to get oxygen from our lungs, the easier it is to pump at a better capacity with minimal effort. The basic principles, and I know I asked you these on the quiz for sure. The overload principle, which we kind of mentioned. I keep wanting to walk away, but I forget to repeat. The overload principle is increasing the stress placed on your body. Now, the overload principle is simply doing something to the point of discomfort. By discomfort, I mentioned picking up a dumbbell and doing this 100 times. You'll eventually overload it. With the heart, it's doing something at such a repetition or doing something that's such out of your comfort zone that you've pushed your heart rate 160, 170, 180, and now you're out of breath and you're sweating. That's building strength in your heart. That's overloaded your heart, so it's created strength. The progressive overload is essentially starting slow and continuing on. Years and years and years ago, I used to do personal training at health centers, and I did it at the hospital with cardiac patients that had had surgery and all kinds of things. And people would come in, and I can't tell you how many patients I saw, or athletes or people that would come in for personal training. They'd come in once or 3 times. And they'd come in and they want to do it all. Did you ever feel like this? Where you feel like, I haven't been to the gym in a while, I'm going to really hit it hard today. And then you go there, you get on the treadmill, and you go lift all the weights, you lift every machine in the building, and then you stretch for an hour and a half, and you do a yoga class, and you go home. And we never see you again. It's because when we think about what do you do to be able to gradually build up to that, there's no kind of set prescription standard. And it bugs me when I read, and I know ACSM standards, and when you look and think, it says you must do 20 to 60 minutes, and you must do, this is your target heart rate zone. And when you look at your module 5, as you figure out your target heart rate zone. Well, if you can't get into that heart rate zone, because maybe 150 is too high for you, because you feel like you're going to collapse and die, then should you just quit? You know what, you should just quit and die an early death. Don't you agree? Of course not. You should try at 120. Do what you can. If you can't walk briskly or jog for 20 minutes, do it for 4. Do it for 6 until you can build up. That's the key. There's no point in ever feeling like a failure in any of this, because the difference between skill-specific and health-specific is, I hate to inform you, but you're not competing with anybody. There's no competition when it comes to health-specific fitness. Health-specific fitness means you want to live longer, you want to live healthier, and you want your body to be fit because it's your body and you're the one that needs to use it. Nobody else cares about that. So literally, there's no competition. The FIT principles to accomplish this are how often you work out a week, at what intensity, which in your module you have the assignment to figure out your heart rate max as well as your heart rate target zone, which is kind of an indicator to you that you're doing exercise in the way that's building strength in your heart. How long are you going to do it? And what type of activities are you going to do? Specificity is choosing something that addresses that specific component. If I do squats, that of course did not make my arms any stronger. As much as I would love that, if it transferred, it doesn't. If I do bench press, it doesn't improve my legs. So when we pay attention to being specific, it's doing what you want. Now, what the reversibility is how quickly it goes away. Which do you think goes away faster? Say you get really cardiovascularly fit. You've been walking 2 or 3 miles a day really briskly, and you've been doing a pretty good pace or jogging or swimming or whatever it is, and you stop doing it. Now we'll say the other's true. You've been lifting weights, and then you stop doing that. Which one goes away quicker? The heart. The heart is the quickest to go. Literally. Because think about it this way. 6 weeks later, after you've been doing all your cardiovascular activity, you stop everything cold turkey. 6 weeks later, you go back and you jump back in. What percentage of that you think you're at? Probably half. 6 weeks later, after you've been building muscle and you go back to it, you're actually still going to be pretty good. You can pick up pretty close to where you left off. But the heart immediately starts to decline, which is the reversibility. And all individuals respond in their own way, which I think is kind of depressing sometimes, because we can be working out together and this person can lose 3 pounds a week. And I might have to go at a slower pace because my heart isn't as strong as hers is or his is. So each person has individual needs and demands and heart strengths and abilities. The difficult part is reminding yourself there's no competition because no one else cares. It's all about you. This is the one place to focus on you. What do you do for activities? And it's not just about cardio. You need muscular endurance activities, increasing flexibility activities, and so on. And there's so many things you can do, but the key is something that you enjoy. And there's a million different things out there, but it has to be something that you like. If you hate it, you're not going to stick with it. If you don't have anybody to support you, it's not going to work out. If you don't have a partner or a friend to be able to call you and say, come with me, let's go, then it's a little bit harder to do it on your own. It's one of those things you really do need to find a support system for. And that can be anybody you know. Aerobic exercises are the ones that we're talking about with your target heart rate to increase your cardiovascular activity and your cardiovascular endurance. And this is where you want to be between about 65 and 91% of your maximum heart rate, which you'll figure out in your activity. And the intensity, I think, more importantly than figuring out any numbers, is are you sweating? Can you still talk? If you can still talk, work harder. If you're not sweating, work harder. If you still look great in your Lululemon fancy outfit and your makeup is perfect, you did not work out. You faked workout, but you did not work out. So attempting to intentionally make yourself uncomfortable. We all know some of the different things that you can do. And there's some that are very, very difficult and some that are very easy. It just depends on you personally, your goals, and what you're comfortable with and what you like to do. What can you do for resistance training? I wish we could do an entire semester on resistance training. I used to teach a course that was literally about resistance training for strength and conditioning for coaches and people that were going to be strength and conditioning coaches. And it was excellent. And I think everybody could benefit from that. So if anybody wants kind of a fitness plan or muscular endurance information or lifting stuff, you can send me an email. But a variety of exercises you can do. You can do weightlifting, not just from being at a gym or a fitness center. You can do them with items in your own home. You can do them with just your own body weight. You can do them with push-ups, leg lifts, squats, lunges. There's a million things that you can do without ever leaving your bathroom if you felt so inclined. How do you improve your muscular strength and endurance? And the three things that are most important are the short, intense exercises that cause oxygen deficiencies in the muscles are anaerobic. Isometric is where the muscle contracts but the body doesn't move. And some of you are thinking, what the heck does that mean? The muscle contracts but the body doesn't move. You're all doing that right now. Can anybody think of a muscle that's contracting but you're not moving? Pardon me? Your heart's still contracting. Your neck. Your back. You're sitting up straight. If your muscles weren't contracting, you would have collapsed by now. Your neck is holding up your head, so they're in a static motion, and they're keeping your head still, and that's considered an isometric contraction. Isotonic contraction is where the muscle actually causes movement. So an isotonic contraction is where you're doing a physical movement. Some of the terms you might hear. You always hear sets, recovery, repetitions. This is the number of times you perform things. There's lots and lots of different schools of thoughts. Believe me, the American College of Sports Medicine has recommendations. There's ACE recommendations. There's all different recommendations for how much you should lift, how often you should lift. But I'll start with the things that are certain. The thing that's certain is your body needs at least a day to recover so your muscles can rebuild, and that's actually when you're building muscle. So if you lift or you do strenuous strength building activities on one day with your legs, you shouldn't do it the next day again with your legs. Now, there's a couple of muscles that don't care how many times you do it. Calves, probably because they're used to walking so much. And your core, your abdomen, you could do those every day. Your heart also doesn't care, and you can do that a million times a day as far as the cardiovascular activity. But when we look at and think about the sets and then the repetitions, the hard part is we get in this gender bias, I notice. Gentlemen want to lift much heavier weights and many less repetitions. And the ladies a lot of times want to lift these really high repetitions and very little weights. And I always hear this phrase from women. And from years of doing strength and conditioning coaching with athletes and with regular people, they would always say, well, I don't want to bulk up, I don't want to get big. Of all the people that I worked with, only 2 people I actually did, of all the people we did heavy strength training. Only 2 people actually bulked up, and it was intentional. They were shot put and disc throwers, and they wanted to get bigger, faster, stronger for their NCAA national championships. That was intentional, and it was hard. It was hard. As females, our bodies are not designed to bulk up. We will not build mass. Even someone that might have a bone structure or shoulder structure as I do, it does not build mass like that. So a man has an easier time of building mass because of testosterone, which is sometimes the goal. The key for women and men is you should lift the repetitions until you fail. So if you choose 6 or 8 or 10, you can make that choice based on your reading and what you decide. But say you choose 10 repetitions. When you're done with the 10th, you shouldn't just put it down and be like, yeah, that was good. I could have done 10 more. If you could have done 10 more, add more weight. That's the key. So if you do 10 on your 10th one, I want you to be like this. I can't get it up. I got it up. Failed. So that was your 10th repetition. That means you were working at the zone that you wanted to be in. So if you chose 8, then make sure you fail at 8. The lower you go with your repetitions, the more weight you lift. There's no reason to go over 12. I hear a lot of people do 15 and 20. Sometimes I see people and they're like, hey, Tracy, how's it going? And they're doing their repetitions and they get done with 20 and they're still talking. And I don't know how much weight they had on there, but it wasn't because they were super strong. It was because I think they were afraid to bulk up. You're not going to bulk up. And every additional pound of body muscle that you have is a metabolism booster for your body fat. That's the key, is to be lean and healthy and to be strong. How do you improve your flexibility? They're specific to the joint you're designed for, which is obvious. And you want to stretch all major muscles, but the most important one is definitely your hamstring. Your hamstrings are most important because they contribute to the lower back injury that's going to affect most of men in this country for disability claims in their lifetime. So paying attention to those and looking at static flexibility, how long can you reach and hold a stretch? And that would be literally reaching out and holding it. And the ability to move quickly and fluidly through a joint's entire range of motion is dynamic flexibility. So that would be how can you move your arm in a full range of motion. Stretch before and after exercises, but after you've warmed up. So the first thing you need to do is get your heart pumping. And if you don't get your heart pumping for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and you jump into flexibility, your body doesn't have oxygenated blood flowing to the muscles. Your muscles need oxygen in order to be able to stretch better. So the more oxygen and blood you can send to your muscles, the warmer they are, the better you can stretch. When you stretch at the end of a workout again, the key for that is, when you stretch at the end, it also helps to reduce the lactic acid in your body. If you ever worked out and then you had to slide out of bed the next day, slide down the stairs because you couldn't actually walk, that's happened to me many times. And the more you stretch and the more flexibility you do, the better it is. And if you ever go to a gym or you watch somebody that's actually a pretty good weightlifter or strength trainer, they lift and then they stretch each muscle every time they lift that muscle. So if they're doing a specific lift, whether it's a bench press or whatever it is, in between every set, they then stretch those same muscles because they recognize them. Stretch at least 2 to 3 times a week. What I like about flexibility is I guarantee if you start stretching, in a week and a half, you'll be way more flexible than you are today. That's pretty awesome. And stretching's pretty lazy, don't you agree? You could do that while you're watching commercials, eating pizza. It's not the hardest thing in the world to do. So I like stretching because it's one of the things you can jump right into. And stretch until you feel tight, but not to the point of discomfort. And don't ever have anybody stretch for you. So don't lay on your back and have somebody throw your leg up over your head so they can see how far you can stretch and then hold it. And we used to do that. When I played sports, a lot of years we always did that. And the hard part about it is they don't know what your breaking point is. So making sure you're only stretching until you're comfortable. Don't lock your joints. And make sure you breathe. Breathing is the key because sometimes people are stretching and they pass out. How much physical activity do we all need? This is the My Activity Pyramid. It's also pyramid. It's also on the website that you guys went to for the My Food Guide Pyramid. This is everything you should be doing every day. What do? We bike, do any yard work, household chores, walking, gardening, planting stuff. Although in Florida it kind of freaks me out because every time I go to plant something, like a lizard comes out at me or a snake or something creepy. But things of this nature. So what do? Then you look at the next level, aerobic activity. Try to make sure that we're getting at least 150 minutes a week. So 150 minutes is 30 minutes 5 times a day, or 60 minutes 2.5, 3 times a week. 30 minutes a day. And 75 minutes of vigorous intensity, which means making sure you're sweating, your heart rate's up, doing something intentional, walking, jogging, swimming, basketball. This would also be where those other things come in. Playing basketball, doing yoga, making sure that you're doing Pilates, making sure you're doing, you could all do some Brazilian butt lifting. Whatever it is that you choose to make sure that you're doing something that gets you out of your comfort zone of just daily stuff. And then at the top 2 there, you've got strength and flexibility, at least a couple times a week. Strength and flexibility has to be something that's weight-bearing activity. It means squats, lunges, leg presses, bench presses, standing up and doing shoulder presses with milk gallons in your home, using bands for resistance, doing a workout video in your living room that involves strength training, going to a gym, doing yoga, which would also be considered strength training as well, and flexibility. Inactivity should be at the very top. And a lot of us have sitting jobs. Some of you have very demanding jobs. You do masonry, or you're a carpet layer, or you do something very physical. And that actually is a benefit to you. But some of us have jobs where we sit the entire day long. Or some of us have jobs where we're walking the entire day long, but our heart is not getting the benefit of cardiovascular disease. So try and kind of assess yourself. Where do you fall as far as your activity level? If you get activity now, do something more. If you're not getting anything, figure out ways where you can put that activity in. Hopefully you're already thinking right now of different ways you can add activity to your everyday life. Or if you're already doing activities, trying to figure out what you can do to increase how much you're doing. And especially if you've got extra weight. I say this because when we look at figuring out how can we add that as part of our life. That's not to say that if you have extra weight, you're not currently doing activity. It's just saying we know that if we have extra weight, that our heart has to work extra hard to pump to the extra weight. So from a really pragmatic standpoint of trying to get your heart to live as long as possible, the body wants to be lean. The leaner you can be, the easier it is for your heart to live a lot longer in the end. And I say this with all truthfulness. In the past, I've lost some weight. Before my 30th birthday, I lost about 120 pounds. And it was a difficult journey for about, I would say it took me a couple years. And one of the things I kind of had a hard time with was I felt like because I was heavy, I couldn't go to the gym. Because everyone at the gym was good looking. They were all cute, and they had these good outfits on, and they weren't sweating as much as I was, and they didn't look like they were working as hard, so I had to just stay at home. And it was kind of one of those things where I thought to myself, I wasn't comfortable with having extra weight because I started to notice the things that were bothering me. And the things that were bothering me were the climbing the stairs, the not being able to do some of the things that I really enjoyed doing, like when I was in college and playing sports. So I started looking out and thinking about who can be supportive. That ended up being my sisters and the people around me that I trusted and that I enjoyed doing things with. And so I think for everybody, like I said, for every pound of extra weight that you carry, you don't want your heart to work any harder than it has to. And that's the main reason when we think about this. And I know a lot of times for weight loss, we think of cosmetic purposes. Cosmetic purposes are the last things we need to think about. The most important thing we need to think about is how can we get our heart to pump as few times as possible so that way it's still pumping that strong in 50 years or longer. And anything you do helps, literally. And begin with light intensity activities that get your whole body moving. Stay motivated, that's the hard part. Have you ever done this? You start a strength and conditioning program, you say, I'm going to be able to bench press this much in 3 weeks, or I'm going to lose 40 pounds by my reunion in July. And then now it's June. So we start to look and think, and then we become depressed because we didn't meet our goals. Setting realistic goals, literally realistic goals, and then overcoming your obstacles. Some of the obstacles we have are there's not enough hours in the day. We know that. And sometimes when we look at it and think, okay, where can we possibly fit doing something active in throughout the day? It has to be forced and it has to be intentional for some of us. And some of us just love it. Some of us love to exercise so much we wouldn't think of a day without exercise, whether it's because of sports that you're playing or because you just love fitness or activity or runners. And if you're not that person, I think the thing I look at that when I see that person is I think, man, they have that internally, that's something that they enjoy, and they do it just the same as they get up and brush their hair and brush their teeth. And that's something that inspires me to think, how can I incorporate that? Instead, I'm one of those exercisers that lies to myself. Does anyone here lie to themselves while you're exercising? I lie to myself. I go jogging, and I'm like, I'm going to jog until I get to that tree, that really far one, about a half a mile from here. I'm going to run like heck until I get to that tree. And then I'm like, well, I kind of meant, I have this tree. And then I'm like, when I get to that tree, that first tree that I meant, I'm going to jog again. And then I'm like, as I'm walking, and I'm like, no, I'm at that stop sign. And then I get done, and I think to myself, the biggest benefit I get when I do actual exercise for cardiovascular benefit like that is not the benefit so much. It's the feeling like I accomplished, I beat me. I beat me at my own game. I beat me lying to myself the whole way and got more out of it than I thought I would. So I think that can be a benefit too. And paying attention to assessing your progress, because I think a lot of times you look at it and think to yourself, did I make it? Did I do anything? And we get stuck in this, I don't feel like I'm lifting anymore. I don't feel like I look any better. I don't feel like my heart's any stronger. And then we realize it is. Your heart's gotten stronger. You do look better. You do feel fitter. You do have less being out of breath when you're climbing stairs or doing regular activities, like carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs or whatever it is. And those are the benefits that you're looking at. Don't just base it on the way that you look when you look in the mirror, because that can be too depressing. Because we're comparing ourselves to people that don't exist on the covers of magazines. Instead, base your motivation for your health on your life expectancy, and how fit you want your body to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now. I think that's the biggest key. Any questions? Let me turn off. I forgot we were recording.